Hello, everyone. Good evening. This is Anish Gupta on behalf of the National Law Training Institute. We are committed towards providing honest and accessible mentorship. And in this pursuit, we today have among us Prem. Prem got a rank of 16 in CLAT 2022 and a rank of All India rank of 2 in CLAT 2022. He has a great command over mathematics, and he believes that his command over mathematics is what led him to crack CLAT and get into NLS. So we have Prem among us, and he'll be sharing his insights on how to prepare for maths and what are the do's and don'ts to ace the quantitative technique section of CLAT. Yeah, so over to you, Prem.
Hi guys. For this con session, my idea is just to introduce everyone to what I did specifically for quants. Um, so there are lots of advice out there, especially if you're out there on a lot of Telegram communities, and it's questionable whether or not most of this advice is reliable. So what I'll be doing is walking you through what I believe worked for me best. So I'll start out with why quants is important, why you should be focusing on quants. Because I know a lot of students who quite literally just gave up on quants. They didn't want to essentially bear the brunt of mathematics. I know a lot of students who are not interested in calculation per se, which is why they say they chose law. You know, the common trope that you hear is, why do lawyers need math at all? Uh, what I believe specifically, if you want to crack CLAD, math is inevitable. Math, I believe, aside from GK, is essentially the game changer section. So first, we'll start out with why quants in specific is important. Aside from GK, like I said, quants carries marks that are 10% of the entirety of the paper. Now, 10% of the paper is substantial, especially given the cutoffs that we have. So, a lot of people I know, for example, in NLS, the cutoff was around 104.75, I believe. And there are people who didn't make it because they had 0.25 or zero point 0.5 lesser than that. Now, if they had one extra question in quants that they attempted in the last 10 seconds of their paper, that would have changed their college altogether. So, if 0.25 and zero point 0.5 can make such a substantial difference, then it must be the case that if you have quants, that is 15 marks as a whole, is extremely important if you want to have any chance of cracking CLAT whatsoever. So, for example, if you deduct a substantial sum from my overall marks, it's unlikely that I would have made it to NLS if I didn't have quants in my bag. So, for quants, there are a few tips and tricks that I'll be giving you throughout throughout this session. Let's start with another fact that I had to mention is most law entrances, whether or not you like it, have to deal with quantitative techniques. So there are exams like, obviously, CLAD, MHCET, Christ, SLAT to an extent, but not to such a large extent. ALET this year the pattern has changed, so it's less mathematically oriented. And the thing about CLAT is the consortium has very little scope to mess it up. It is very unlikely that you will see that the consortium messes up basic math. I mean, even in CLAT 2022, for example, an answer key was wrong. An element in the answer key was wrong, but that was changed immediately after objections were raised. Now, CLAT 2021 is a different story because the sets were fundamentally flawed. But my point being is that you can rely on quants any day if you want short marks. You can't say the same for other sections like RC and CR. So if you're good with your quants, then this can go a long way in actually helping you get more marks. Uh, so most toppers that I know, so say for example, AIR won this year, Rishabh Shivani, who's also with NLTI, he scored 15 on 15 in quants. My point is, most toppers, if you want a good score, quants is non-negotiable, especially if you want to be in the top 20, top 50, which I hope most people are aspiring for. You will have to have at least a decent quant score above 11, above 12, even if not 15. I would say that 15 is fairly achievable for most students who are taking the exam, regardless of whether or not you come from a math background. I'll move on next to what sources you can refer to for quants. Now, quants in general, it is very general aptitude focused. As in, we're not testing particular facets of what you're looking at in terms of whether you can do compound interest or whether you memorize these formulae. CLAT does not focus on that. So for the most part, they're trying to check your numerical aptitude. For that, you can refer to different sources. What I did was, personally, I took a lot of banking exam books. I solved time, speed, and distance. I solved profit loss questions. I solved compound interest questions. Now, these aren't directly relevant to what came in CLAT, But the idea of solving these questions is that you become familiar with numbers. You start learning on how to deal with numbers. So even when my brain wasn't concentrating on quants itself, I would know that if I suddenly a calculation came up, even in my daily life, a calculation came up, I would be able to do it faster because in general, I was more used to dealing with numbers. So the point of getting better at quants is just get used to dealing with numbers, and you can do that in any way whatsoever. The most effective way I found is to take these data interpretation books out there. So I was talking to Kanishk, who's also AR55. He's from NLTI, and he said that what helped him the most in quants was data interpretation books. So what you do is you pick up certain books which have they mimic the sets that we had in CLAT 22 for the most part. They'll have tables or they'll have a set of data that you have to organize and then answer the questions. So these data interpretation books are quite helpful. Second, you can refer to past year papers. Now, when I say past year papers, because I said you have to focus on general aptitude, you don't have to restrict yourself to certain concepts only. You can go all the way before the new pattern as well. So even CLAT 2019, CLAT 2018, their mathematics was fundamentally different from what we have now. Ours is more data interpretation oriented, more basic, but at the same time, those who are mathematically heavy too. So if you mastered the ones with mathematically heavy concepts, then this one becomes much easier to handle in general. It's also useful to become familiar with your 10th grade textbook, although I wouldn't recommend going through the entire thing. Just for safety, I'd say keep the menstruation formula in mind. Although I highly doubt it will come. The most important parts, although you have to keep in mind, is coming next to the syllabus. You have percentages, ratio, proportion, profit, and loss. I would focus most of my time on these three particular subjects. Another fourth one that isn't mentioned here, though, I will say is tables. So if you look at CLAT 2022, each of the sets, all three of the sets, required some form of organization or the other. You have to organize the given information in a table. So in quants, it isn't just a challenge of calculation, it's also a challenge of how you organize this information. And that's a less discussed part about quants. So what you have to do is become familiar with drawing these tables, organizing this information in your head, and then working with this information. That's also extremely crucial that you won't find as a part of any syllabus. You just have to get used to this by solving data interpretation sets. Now, CLAT 2021 and 2022 did not heavily deal with things like area and perimeter, although CLAT 2020 did. So I would say, for the sake of safety and because the consortium is known to be unpredictable, that to be on the safer side, you are well versed with volume, surface area, perimeter, linear equations, time, speed, distance. Even if these don't directly come the exam, you don't have to be disappointed because, like I said, quantitative techniques, it's all about improving your general mathematical aptitude. So if you have your finger on the mathematical facets of time and work on area and perimeter, you generally get more comfortable dealing with numbers. So even if you don't directly get these in the exam, I would say don't be disappointed, but mostly focus on working with numbers. So say for example, in ratio, proportion, and percentages, you have certain tricks like you every time in percentages you have to divide something 100 divided by something. So if it goes 100 by 4, it's 25. If it goes 100 by 5, it's 20, so on and so forth. And if you say, for example, if it's 100 by 7, it's 14.28. Now you don't calculate things like these on the spot. You try and look for them in the, so there are certain charts. You already have a set numbers. I will go from 1 to 15 all the way and memorize 100 divided by 1 to 15. When it comes to the exam, I have this information on my fingers. I can use it as soon as I want. I don't have to manually calculate all of this. So just being familiar with the intricacies of things like proportion, percentages, that will go a long way in helping you calculate faster. Next, I would say the most important part of your quant section, attending quants, is strategy. The question to ask yourself is, how difficult is quants for you? Are you used to dealing with quants? So if you come from a math background or generally you like math, then quants can be a much easier set for you. If you're familiar with it, then no problem. But if you aren't familiar with it, again, no problem. You just have to approach the paper differently. So depending on how difficult quants is for you, you determine the order in which you're going to do quants, and this is especially important because when I met people during my preparation, I recommended that they did quants last. And that's because in the beginning, I wasn't very familiar with math. I wasn't very familiar with quants. I got better at it as time went by. Generally, I would recommend, it's my personal recommendation, it can work differently for you. Keep quants in the last. Once you've done all your other questions, you come last to quants. You should have about 20 to 25 minutes left for quants. and you work on quants. I know people who've done, say for example, they've done RC, gone to one set of quants, then gone to LA, gone to one set of quants, CR, and then come back to the last set of quants. I know people who've done this. I know it's worked for them well, but they have peculiar advantages like an extremely high reading speed that's worked for them. So generally, I would say for everyone, the advice is finish all your questions first, come to quants with an empty mind, come in the last. Because the thing is, if you miss out on a few marks in quants, as long as you get a score above 10, you're somewhat safe. Although you should try to aspire for 15, but missing out on verbals can be especially fatal because verbals are scoring sections. Um, Now, anticipating the difficulty of next year's paper, given what we had in CLAT 2021 and CLAT 2022, I would say in 2023, ideally it should not be different, but as aspirants, we're not preparing for the ideal scenario. We're preparing for a scenario that's quite less than ideal. That is why I said in the previous when we're discussing the syllabus that make sure you focus on concepts like time, speed, distance, time and work, and algebra, mensuration. All these, even though you haven't done these in the previous exam papers, being well versed with them now can help. Just presume that the paper that you're going to encounter is going to be as difficult as they can possibly throw at you. And once you're prepared, you have that mental preparation in mind, an easier paper will be a pleasant surprise for you. Now, time management. I would say this is without question the most important part of taking quant strategically. Because obviously, if you have 40 minutes left for quants, you're going to do it extremely well. If you have 10, you're not going to do it as well. So the idea is how do you manage your time for quants? Now, this is directly tied to which order you attempt it in. If you attempted, say, for example, quants first, you might end up spending more time than is actually needed for quants. Ideally, I would say recommend if you're not taking quants in the last, make sure that your quants time is restricted to 20 to 25 at most. Try and solve it in 15 if you're especially good at calculation. If the sets are quite easy, try and solve it in 15, but make sure quants is restricted to 20 to 25. Within these 20 to 25 minutes, I will discuss the psychological battle later, which is a huge part of attempting quants. But the idea is to make sure you try and attempt as many questions and you don't have to attempt all. If there's a certain question in the three sets that stump you, that you don't know how to navigate conceptually, then you leave it. You go on to the next question, but you still make sure that you try and attempt as many as you can with relatively good accuracy in those 20 to 25 minutes that you adopted quants. Now, when practicing, this is not during the paper, but I would say when you're practicing for quants, my idea is even if you aren't fully conceptually clear, now there are some concepts in time, speed, and distance that take some time to digest. So even if you aren't fully conceptually clear, I would say dive into the questions. Because as you start solving the questions, you start asking yourself, okay, here's where I'm going wrong, and I don't think that I can solve it. So what's the reason I can't solve it? You break your head over one question for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then you can come to a solution. Then you realize, okay, this is something that I can possibly do. This is something that will be helpful. So what I would say is, even if you're not fully clear with the concept, start taking questions. I would analogize this to taking mocks. Even if you don't exactly know how to go about RC, even if you don't exactly know how to go about CR, you take as many mocks as you possibly can and you gradually get better at it. So similarly with quants, you take as many data oriented questions as you possibly can, and the idea is you gradually get better at it with time. Now, coming to data orientation, another important point I want to discuss is organization. Like I brought up before, make sure that you are acquainted with the skill of organizing information. Doing things like analytical reasoning might slightly help in the side because a lot of AR is organizing the information that you get. So once you read the information, you organize the information, then you move on to how exactly do I solve this now that I've organized the information. Now, when you're attempting, when you have quants in order, the question is, okay, I have the three sets in front of me. In which order do I attempt the three sets? My general advice is attempt it in ascending order of difficulty. So attempt the easiest set and the first and the most difficult set last. How you do this is you stop at the concept, you take about 10 to 15 seconds, you determine which one could be easier, which one could be tougher, and you take the easier one first. Because if you take the easier one first, you have more time on your hands and you can allocate that time to other sections if necessary. Ideally, you should be able to do all of them. But I would say skim it, see which set can be easier. It's fine if you go wrong, that happens all the time, but take 15 and 20 seconds, find out which set is easier and go for that set first. Attack that set first. The next one I will be discussing are general tips and tricks. So if you want to organize your information, like I said in CLAT 2022, all of them required some form of organization in the table. So if you want to organize your information, make sure there's a part of the question paper that you can organize it on, And to do this, don't just use, well, this is what I did at least, and it worked well for me. I had a pencil for one, I had a black pen for one, and a blue pen for one. So this way, my organization is much more clearer. If I have information that's different, so if I have information of object A and object B, and both of these have separate information, putting them both in black, I could get confused because it's extremely fast paced. I have to make sure I solve points as soon as possible. So there was the option of getting confused. So what I did was, if I put object A in blue and object B in black, then there was little scope of me getting confused between this information, because I knew which one was A and which one was B because of the color coding. And to organize the information, the reason I had a pencil is so I could quickly draw lines. You can do this on empty spaces. Sometimes you'll have it at the end of the question paper. I prefer to do it right next to the set. So because it's quick reference if you can do it right next to the set. If it's a little smaller, there's no problem, as long as you can make sure that the set is legible. This is what I did. Now, when it comes to calculation, like I said previously, diving into the questions and just solving, even if you're not solving any form of questions, just in general, sitting around and asking yourself, okay, what's 15 into 18? What's 24 into 28? Just doing things like these, getting yourself well acquainted with numbers, trying to solve these even in your free time, will make sure that you have a better approximation skill. Now, why approximation is important is because in quants there is a lot of scope for you to get into time crunch. So the way that you can combat this time crunch is by using general intuitive approximation. If you have a generally good mathematical aptitude, then this is an extremely easy part. Another part of approximation is using the options. So say for example, I have calculated something I have to finally multiply that with an even number. If I have to multiply something by 2, I mean 2 is very simple to multiply, so I have to multiply that in an even number. Can my option be odd? So I have to examine the data that I have, and I have to check if whether or not this can be even or odd. And on the basis of even or odd, you could probably eliminate one or two options. And if you use the approximation technique on top of that, find which one of them could be the closest number, then the option gets much easier. Ideally, you should get the entire answer, but if you aren't able to get the answer in a time crunch, these tricks are especially helpful. What I did was, previously in 11th grade, I used to refer to Vedic Maths. I didn't use it much in the exam, but as far as I gather from books that I've read about Vedic Maths, it essentially, even if you don't adopt those techniques directly of solving them quickly, because it takes some time to learn, they will help your general mathematical aptitude. So I would say, if you're looking for another mathematical system, give Vedic Maths a shot. It can be especially helpful. Now, what I did for conceptual clarity, things like time, speed, distance were particularly tricky for me. So I went on to YouTube channels, or just finding miscellaneous information online, asking your mentors, how exactly do I go about these concepts? Once you have a brief idea, take a question book and start solving. Start solving, and once, if you encounter a roadblock, take someone's assistance. Ideally, try thinking through it yourself first. Try breaking your head on it for half an hour. If you can't, take someone's assistance, talk to a mentor, get conceptual clarity, and get right back into the questions. That's what I would recommend. So if you're running short on time, this is an example that I tell everyone, a trick that I pulled in CLAT 2022. There was a certain set that required you to divide 50,000 by a certain number. Now, I didn't know that we had to divide this by 3, but I looked at the options. All the options said something like 18,667, 17,667, 16,667. And I had the only number I had in my hand to work was with 50,000. Now I said, okay, 50,000, how could 50,000 correlate to all these numbers? And I was surprised to find that immediately, because I was well versed with maths, 50,000 divided by 3 intuitively correlated to 16,667. And immediately I marked it because I was short on time. I didn't know if I'd get it right or not. But after I see it, even though I didn't fully understand the logic because of how constrained I was by the time, I got it right, because I knew that this was an intuitive approximation, that there was some correlation between the numbers, between the number 50,000 and 16,667. So even if I didn't have the number 3 to divide it by, this intuitive approximation helped me extremely quickly. Another thing I did was table formation. So for some of us, in the beginning, you might have some extra time in order to fill. You might have some extra time in the very beginning. So I would recommend, take your pencil. Like I said, I got a blue pen, a black pen, and a pencil. Take your pencil and just make tables in empty areas. So if you already have these tables pre-organized on the D-Day, then it gets much easier to attempt these questions, instead of trying to fumble and make the tables last second when you can't find time. This can take away from your calculation time. It can be extremely stressful. I would suggest that is something that you not do. Coming to the next part of it is math phobia. So the thing is that most of CLAT, the entirety of CLAT, in my experience, has been a psychological game, and this is not restricted to quants, but it especially applies in quants. So, for example, if I take calculation, this is especially applicable to calculation. When you sit down and you come to the quants, let's say you've taken quants for last or whichever order you've taken it in, if you sit down, you will notice that your heart is usually rushing, or you're usually panicking, and this is fairly normal for an exam like CLAT that decides your future. But when you come to cons, it's especially important to have a calm state of mind. This is because when I've done quants in a hurry, when I'm extremely nervous, I tend to make errors that are extremely basic. Instead of multiplying or dividing it by 3, I will do it by 5. Instead of doing it by 2, and things like I will forget to add 1, I will forget to add 10. These errors that are very elementary will be committed even if you don't want them to when you're anxious. So I would say before you start quants, just think of your state of mind. Think of how you're feeling right now. If you're extremely anxious, take 10 seconds, close your eyes, and then dive into maths. You can afford to lose 10 seconds if the next 15 to 20 minutes of your quant section are with you in a calm state of mind, because that way you'll have a much better accuracy and a much better speed to approach the section as a whole. So, in general, people have this conception that math is difficult. I'm not made for math, that only certain kids are math whizzes. This is not true. This is conclusively not true, because I have not been great at math my entire life. But I knew that I wanted to crack CLAT, and in order to do that, I had to make sure that I was well versed with math. What I did was I took 2 weeks to myself. 2 weeks of solid practice every day. You can disperse this throughout a larger period of time, but within 2 weeks, what I did was I took about 2 hours every day just solving set after set after set. I would get stuck a lot of times. Sometimes I would do very well, but remember, in all these sets that I took, I would time myself, and that is crucial. You have to emulate the pressure that you will feel on the day of the exam when you're taking quants. So if you time yourself while you're practicing, it'll be extremely helpful because you're already acquainted to taking it within a short period of time. And then you can also apply these tactics of approximation and intuition that I already mentioned if you're under a time crunch. So I would say time it, make sure you practice. For me, math is the easiest section to improve in. Now, if you haven't started out with a great verbal aptitude, it can get difficult to improve that in a short span of time. But with math, it is extremely easy. It's 15 marks. You give yourself 2 to 3 weeks, increase your general aptitude with numbers, and it's extremely easy to get a 15 on 15. I would even go so far as to say that it's feasible for every aspirant to get a 15 on 15. It depends on how you manage the time. It depends on how well you prepare for quants. It depends on how well you're acquainted with the paper. So I would say don't give up on math. Don't give up on quants. Make sure that you're okay with it on the D-Day. Another thing I've noticed is it's general psychological battle. So for me, sleep was a problem. I had to make sure to get enough sleep because I noticed that my calculative ability, and this might not sound much, but when you're talking about seconds and minutes in an exam like CLAT, this is a lot. I would notice that my calculative ability was much better if I had a good day of sleep, if I had good meal in the morning. I would say have a good day of sleep, have a good meal in the morning, make sure you're in a calm state of mind, and in general, you'll be able to do math much, much, much better. And if you dispel of the notion that in general you are bad at math, this will also go a long way. Now, it's proven in multiple scientific studies that confidence improves performance, full stop. Even if you don't improve your skill directly at it, the mere fact that you are confident, even if this confidence is unfounded, even if you're actually bad at math, this will improve your performance. So, in general, try to dispel of the notion that you are inherently bad at math and there's no way that you can improve at math. And even this confidence that you have will go a long way in helping you ace the paper in the math section. That's about it. I could take any doubts and clarifications if there are any.
Yep. So Prem, you said that try to have like 20 to 25 minutes when you reach the QT section. So I'm assuming that to have such a time, you need to have a good, very good reading speed, in fact, and a good comprehension skills. So what do you suggest our aspirants to do to improve their reading speed and their comprehension abilities, so that once they go through the entire passage, they do not have to come back to it while they're referring to the questions? And what do you think should be the ideal time to read a passage and then move on to the questions?
Ideal time for a passage to read a passage, I would say give yourself 1.5 to 2 minutes. I referred back to the passage all the time. That is completely okay to refer back to the passage. For those who don't have the greatest reading speed, I would say you don't have to comprehend everything in the passage. Not at all. In fact, I would say read the questions very closely. A lot of the questions, especially in RC and CR, they weren't directly dealing with the passage. They're more of playing the drafter's mind. So you're not dealing with your interpretation of the passage. You're dealing with the drafter's interpretation of the passage. So read the questions very carefully, and the passage you can skim through. That's fine. The idea when you read through the passage is not to remember every fact. You will never remember every fact. Just accept that. The idea is to get a general idea of what is the author saying, what is his stance. So once you have extrapolated his stance, you see where the drafter is taking you and you follow the drafter along. So when you look at an option, so I remember, say, for example, in legal, there are two consecutive questions which had the same fact scenario. The second one had a very slight modification. So I thought, during the paper, I saw this and I thought, why would the drafter want me to mark the same question for both? Why would he want me to mark the same option for both questions that have a similar set of facts? It must be the case that there's a trick here. And it turned out to be correct because in the first question there was option A, and the second question was option B. That slight modification that the drafter made was intended to change your answer to the question. So in general, I didn't refer back to the passage of this one. I was reading the drafter. I said, what is the drafter trying to do while framing these questions? So if you want the time breakup, for me it was usually this way: try and spend 22 to 24 minutes in RC. The exact same applies for logic. And legal, give yourself about 30 to 35 minutes. Sometimes you can extend to 40 depending on how difficult it is. And usually I would compromise on my time for quantitative aptitude. I would give most of my time to these other sections. When it came to quants, sometimes I had 15 minutes, but if the set was easy, luckily I could do all 15. So I would prioritize verbals. I would say attempting all in verbals is a non-negotiable. But and it can be difficult if you don't have a good reading speed, but that's something that you develop over a long term. Especially if you try and read challenging text, reading easier text just becomes much more of a flow state to you. So if you try and maintain, for what I did, I tried to maintain 20 to 25 minutes for cons, because for me I prefer to take cons slow. Like I said, that psychological pressure always got to me. So if I generally had more time for cons, I would be much more comfortable attempting cons. I knew. So, for example, one of the people I was studying with, Sanjana, she used to have about 30 to 35 minutes for quants in every mock that she took. And that's just because she had a great reading speed. So, your reading speed can also spill over into your quants. So, if you want to ace quants, you have to ace the other sections as well. So, in that sense, every section is connected. You have to distribute your time accordingly, but the time distribution I gave initially is what most people end up following. Sometimes legal can take a little bit extra. It did for me. Legal took some extra time for me, but I knew I wanted 20 to 25 minutes for quants. So I raced through logic, and it came at a price, because legal I did extremely well. I think I got 35 or 36.25 out of 40 in legal. But in CR I didn't do as well, because I raced through the entirety of CR. In hindsight, if I read the options more carefully, or if I read the passage more carefully, I would have got it. But I knew that I wanted this much time for cons, and it paid off because I got a good score in cons. So it was okay for me to sacrifice that reading speed in CR, but I still made sure I attempted everything in CR. For me, attempting as much as I could was a non-negotiable. So I sacrificed sometimes on the comprehension, but I made sure that I got to cons.
Right. So, which sources do you suggest to read these challenging texts? Did you refer to GMAT? Did you refer to LSAT prep or any like Aon essays? So, where did you read these texts from?
Yeah. So I used to read regularly from Aeon.co and Psyche. Psyche is the sister website of Aeon, and LSAT without a doubt. So LSAT was one of my most instrumental tools of preparation. It is absolutely for free on Khan Academy. That's how I used LSAT, and I prepared for LSAT in 2021, for which I got an All India rank of 3. So for me, LSAT was one of the most fun exams. That's It's fun because I enjoyed reading the dense and challenging text. Even if I wasn't doing LSAT in RC, especially in LSAT, LSAT and GMAT, both of them are relatively along the same lines, but I would say LSAT US is much harder. So if you go through the LSAT US, chances are you'll probably do very bad at it, and that's completely okay, because I did very bad at it. But the thing is, I did it over and over again, and I realized that it's something that you can get better at. And unlike CLAT, LSAT does not have errors at all. So if you get a question wrong, you know you're wrong, and the consortium's not. And in this particular case, the LSAT drafters are not wrong. So I also, in general, like to read philosophy, which is usually dense and challenging. So things like Plato, or there's a Harvard professor, Michael Sandel. Pick up their books, try and understand it. You will zone out a million times while you're reading it, and you should completely accept that. You cannot expect to be a whiz as soon as you pick up any book. You just get better at it gradually over time. So pick up any difficult text you can from a genre. If you want to pick up a genre, I recommend philosophy. You read through this text, and in general you get better at understanding it. Aeon has challenging science articles, so if you come across a science article in the RC section, you know that you can deal with this science article quite easily, because you have a general so in RC especially, if it's not fiction, and if it's say crypto, for example, in CLAT 22 we had a here an example on crypto. Because I had some background information on crypto, I could skim through the passage faster. So prior knowledge of subjects in general can help you enhance your reading speed specific to that passage. It's also useful to read vastly in that sense.
Right. So, Prem, coming to the question of GK. So, GK has also been the most unpredictable section, like similar to what maths has been. Like sometimes there are errors in GK as well. Sometimes there are errors in maths as well. So, how did you prepare for GK? And did you get like zoned out when you saw that GK was very unpredictable for the CLAT 2022 exam as well? And what were the sources that you like referred to for the GK section?
All right. So for the GK section, I had a static set of sources. This is where I think NLTI's model comes in very handy, useful. Is that you have study buddies. What I did was I met a group of friends, Sanjana, who's AR 7, Anirudh, who is AR 24, and Kedar, who is AR 143. We are all in NLS now. I met these group of friends, and we decided that we would pick up about 5 to 6 sources. I'll outline these 5 to 6 sources, but we picked up 5 to 6 sources, and we said, okay, it's not feasible for us to go through all of these sources and on every topic and collate it individually. So what we'll do, we picked a common notebook. We picked the software platform Evernote. We picked a common notebook. All of us shared this notebook, and I would say, okay, I will take Drishti today. You take the Hindu today. You take the Indian Express today, and what we'll all do is we'll all pile in the important information that we have onto this notebook. So we would have one note for NRC, we would have one note for census, we'd have one note for Russia, Ukraine, and all the important information on these topics from these different sources we've all collected on here. The idea is at the end when we're revising, we don't have to go back to all these sources because that's infeasible. We have them, all of it is collected on this one source, so we can refer to this source and immediately our problems are resolved. For the sources, if I recall correctly, we had coaching material specific sources, which most of the prominent coaching materials offer. If you go there, I'm pretty sure you guys are already well acquainted with that. I had the Indian Express. For me, that was important, especially for political events that came in use in Russia, Ukraine. So, for example, my study partners, they did not get the Volodymyr Zelensky question, um, because I read Indian Express all the time. Indian Express used to bombard you with political news like Russia, Ukraine, Russia, Ukraine. It was a very hot topic at the time. So for me, I was very familiar with it because I had read his name over and over again. So for me to get his question spelling right was not an issue. I marked it immediately and I moved on. And I got full five in that passage as well. Indian Express was a non-negotiable for me, extremely helpful. It has the explained section. If you can get Indian Express Premium, especially if you're pooling in with a bunch of study partners, it's not too expensive individually. Get an Indian Express Premium account. Refer to the Hindu daily. Again, you can enhance your general. The Hindu has various articles on science, politics. If you read all of these, you'll enhance your general knowledge base, which is useful for CLAT again, and also your reading speed, which is also useful for CLAT, and obviously GK. So in the newspaper, so triple function in that sense. Uh, the Hindu newspaper, the Indian Express online articles, and there are a couple other sources, and also Drishti. Yeah, IAS Drishti was also pretty important. Completely free. You can go online, get their monthly compendiums or their daily sources. I would generally recommend you read all of these, but if you have a study partner, each of you take notes on one source. So after the day was done, I would go and ask my study partner, okay, did you take notes on this today? This looks important. And we discuss the current affairs in general. That would also help us solidify that in our mind. We discuss the current affairs and we'd say, okay, you've taken notes on this, right? Good, because we'll refer back to it in the end. The mistake that most of us made was we had so much information. We collected 1,400 pages. So this is a lot of information, and we have 1 month left. We had to take all of this in, so we binge read it. Our we in the last month we were like breathing GK. That's all we used to do the entire day. 1400 pages, the four of us had to run through the entire thing. It would have been more helpful if we left more time for revision. So the mistake I made was, and I would recommend that even if you make notes, whatever notes you're making, make it with a study partner and prioritize revision. The sources, honestly, in my opinion, don't matter much. You don't have to refer to specific sources. Just make sure that most prominent sources cover the news generally. And no matter how well you cover it, sometimes you will just miss information. That is the truth. So in mocks that I used to take, I used to get 30, 32 plus, even in GK sections. But in the actual CLAT, I got 23.75, which given relative scores was also a good score because most people couldn't make it past 20. So for me, GK is also very psychological, and it's not just knowledge based. I know my study partners and I took quite a few guesses from GK. So, say for example, if you had the corporate social responsibility passage, you had to guess the full form of something. We had no idea whatsoever because no one read CSR as a prominent topic. But that full form, we were like, okay, which full form seems most suitable? So we try and analyze the social context, political context. It's mostly intuitive. Sometimes it can be very random as well. But we tried to pick the option that was most suitable to the context of CSR. And somehow, sometimes we got it right. Because the thing is, the way the system works is if you take four guesses and you get one of them right, you still get 0.25 plus. So if you didn't attempt these four, you would get zero. But if you attempted these four, got three wrong and one right, you have 0.25 plus. So it still benefits you in some sense to take a risk. This can backfire, but I would say if you're making a guess, make sure your guess is intelligent. Because I didn't know a lot in CLAT 2022, I left four in GK. And given our track record, we never leaved anything in GK because we had covered a lot of information. 1,400 pages, we knew a lot. All of us were expecting to get 30 plus in GK. CLAT 2022 completely shattered that dream, and 2023 will probably shatter it for you too. So be prepared for them. Uh, just make sure that you cover your bases as much as you can. I knew as I took CLAT that I've done a lot of GK prep. I have faith in the prep that I've done. And if this is bad for me, which I'm feeling it is bad now, then it's bad for everyone. So try and make sure you make intelligent guesses. A lot of the times I dealt with this problem of having this. I think I read this कुछ पहले पढ़ा था पर अभी immediately नहीं आ रहा है. In that particular case, I will think long and hard. I will try to pull it out of my mind if I can. But if I can't, if my brain is hinting towards that one option, I'll mark it. And I think by doing this, in this particular case, I got about 1 or 2 GK marks. Just because I couldn't immediately pull it out, but I marked what popped out to me. So in that sense, it is psychological that you have to try and dig deep in your brain and also be okay with making intelligent guesses. I know a lot of people who got a decent score in GK, like say 17, 18, 19. But the thing is, they left like 10 questions. So they attempted the questions that only they were sure of. I would say that is not a great strategy. So, for example, my study partner, Sanjana, she attempted all 35 on 35. Her overall GK score was 24.5, which is great considering none of us knew the answer to every single question, but we attempted it anyways. So it is always in your favor to try and make more attempts, but make sure these attempts are intelligent, that they're based off of something.
Right. Thank you, Prem, for these insights. So, since you got a better rank in A-led, did you do anything different for A-led? Any different preparation strategy as compared to CLAT? What did you do special that got you a better rank in A-led?
So I would say there are two particular reasons. One is that the pattern change worked to my advantage. Absolutely no one knew how ALET would be. So there was no way for you to prepare well, no matter how many mocks you took, you wouldn't know how the paper would turn out to be. On the other hand, I had taken a variety of exams. I took LSAT already. I prepared for the old ALET pattern. I took CLAT. So because I had taken a variety of these exams, I was ready for anything they threw at me. So I had the advantage in that sense. But I think second and the most important is, I realize this now in hindsight, is exams can be so arbitrary in the sense that I think I got a better rank in ALET because I didn't care about ALET. Because at that time, my NLS, my CLAT ranks had already come out. I got AR 16. I said, okay, I'm going to NLS. I've already wanted NLS. Let me just take ALET for fun. That was the idea. So in the last few days preceding ALET, I didn't even prepare for it because I thought, even if I get a rank of like 9,000, I'm okay with it because I already have NLS. I went in there not preparing at all, and my mind was completely free. But that was not the case with CLAT, because in CLAT it was, I was extremely anxious. I didn't know if I do well, and if I wouldn't do well, should I drop? All these questions are running through my head, so it's a lot of pressure on that day. But on the day of ALET, because I didn't have any reason to do well at it, I did well at it. That's the irony of how these exams work.
Right, right. So, Prem, since you were a fresher and gave CLAT alongside your board exams, how did you manage your time? And since now CLAT is only 4 months from now, and they'll have pre-boards, they'll have semester exams in September, October. What do you suggest? Like, should they devote their time to CLAT and then work on boards in the latter half, in the former half of the second year, or should they take a balanced approach?
So I would not be able to offer the greatest advice in this sphere because I was homeschooled. This is something that Sanjana and I did. There's a board known as National Institute of Open Schooling. 1 year in advance, we registered for this board. We did not have to attend any classes. Just at the end of the year, you give one set of exams and you're done with it. I saw a lot of my peers struggling with their boards, but they also pulled through. But in general, the advice I would give is it's okay to not do, and this is unless you're planning to pursue higher academia, then please do well in your 12th. But it's okay to not do that well in your 12th, and devote more time to CLAT prep. This is the suggestion that I gave to everyone. Personally, I got I think 80 something in my board exams, which I was not too particularly happy about, but I didn't bother either. I said it's my board exams. I'm not going to refer to these results again. They aren't going to matter anymore because I'm not planning to do academia in the long run as well. So no one's going to look at my 12th and say, why did you get only this much percentage? Why not more? Because NLS, I believe the eligibility criteria is 45%. So like even the most bare minimum, even if you barely do any work, you will probably scrape through your board exams enough for whatever college you're looking for. I believe most NLUs follow around 40 to 45 to 50%. Uh, so my idea was I try to do well in my board exams, but for the most part, the way my preparation was structured is I gave 2-3 months entirely to CLAT, but when my exams were coming very closely, I gave all my time to these exams. So I gave 20 to 21 days to these exams. Again, I have the luxury of saying this because my exams were far away from CLAT. For those whose exams are near CLAT, abandoning CLAT in the last few days altogether can be detrimental because you have to be in that headspace of taking mocks and doing CLAT. That mental game also matters. So I did took 20 to 21 days for my syllabus. I structured my syllabus. I said, okay, I have these many chapters. I have 30 chapters, and I have 30 days, for example. So I'll do one chapter per day. So I structured my entire board exam syllabus that way. I would try and follow that. I had study partners to keep me accountable. Are you doing this work or not? Because we have to make sure that we work on CLAT. And we side by side we had a study mechanism going, right? So we'd work on GK, we do quizzes, and if you see that this guy is faltering, he's not updating. If he's not updating their, they're not updating their sources, they're not doing GK well. So the question is, what are you doing? Because we're all preparing together. They'll keep each other accountable. They'll ask them, are you slacking off somewhere? Is there work that you could be doing better? So I had my study partners to keep me accountable. But at the same time, in general, the advice is structure your syllabus, a lot time to study for it. In general, if you don't think your 12th marks will matter in the future, it's okay to prioritize CLAT.
Right. So coming to the question of mocks, Prem, what was the total number of mocks that you gave, and what was your frequency? Did it change during the latter part of your CLAT preparation journey, or it was like constant throughout your journey? What was the frequency?
I gave 144 mocks in total. And this is a lot from a lot of coaching institutes because I tried and pulled, like there are Telegram communities out there from which you can pull mocks all the time. And you can also pull mocks from the coaching institutes that you're subscribed to, whatever that you try and pick out. But the idea was that I would take 2 mocks a week. And I did that very consistently for 10 to 9 months, 9 to 10 months. I technically prepared for CLAT as a fresher for 2 whole years. But when I intensified my preparation was after CLAT 2021. I had suddenly seen my seniors who I already knew how I was preparing CLAT would suddenly get into NLS. So I was particularly inspired by them. And immediately after CLAT 2020 was over, I called my friends. I said, let's make this study group. Once we made this study group, we all kept each other accountable in taking 2 mocks a week. So our study group didn't just serve as a GK mechanism, it also served as a mocks mechanism. After every mock was done, we'd ask each other questions about the mock. this question seemed wrong. Tell me what you marked for this question. Why did you mark this for this question? So in that sense, we analyze the mock as well. And if you hadn't taken the mock, then you couldn't participate in this analysis. So the study group, the existence of the study group, made sure that you took at least 2 mocks a week. In the middle part of my preparation, let's say around, not middle part, around April to May, I took the exam in June 19th. So April to May, I was taking 3 mocks a week. It's important to have at least 1 day gap between the mocks that you're taking. But I was taking 3 mocks a week. But towards the ending, say the last 10, 15 days, I took only 1 or 2 mocks a week. Because in general, the advice is in the end, take it slow, don't try and burn yourself out just before the exams. So I would say if you're preparing intensely, especially for the last 3, 4 months, 3 mocks a week is a healthy goal.
Right. And what about analysis? What was the strategy to analyze your mocks? Did you go through the entire mock again or only the wrong questions?
Yeah, so for mocks, we had divided our study group had divided mocks into two types of analyses. One was individual analysis, the other was group analysis. So as soon as you're done with the mock, you have to conduct individual analysis. For me, individual analysis took 1.5 to 2 hours for every mock. For ALET mocks, it was obviously shorter. But for individual analysis, what I would do, this technique I learned from the LSAT community. It's something called blind review. So what you do is you got question 18 wrong. So what I would do is I would mark question 18 and I would move on. Now when I'm reviewing the whole paper, I review all my answers, the right ones and the wrong ones. So the reason it's important to review your right answers is because in your head, once you do the right answers, you're affirming the correct logic that went through your head. So once you're affirming the correct logic, the next time you come through the same logic, you said, okay, I've already done this logic. I know it's correct. So I'm sure this will also be the correct logic again. So I would definitely say go through the questions you got right as well. But when it came to the wrong questions, I never checked what the correct option was. So now I know I marked option D, for example, and option D turns out to be the wrong answer. So I have A, B, and C to choose from. Now I will examine A, B, and C and check which one is likely. So instead of 4 options, I now have 3 options, and now I'll reattempt the question in my head. And this time also, if I get it wrong, then there's obviously something either wrong with the question or wrong with my analysis. Once I reattempt the question, then I will go back to the explanation and try to figure out where I went wrong or where the question went wrong, which also quite happened quite a bit. That's what the group analysis served for. So once you've done these individual analyses, gone through each right question, wrong questions, you collect all your wrong questions and you bring it to the group. You say, look, I got this question wrong. Did you guys get it wrong? And if you got it right, give me your logic for it. Give me your explanation. And if their logic or their explanation was correct, then we would follow it because it made sense. And in the end, we'd finalize on a set of questions that were problematic or questions that were difficult. So that's how our analysis structure worked. But I would say, and for quants in your mocks, if you didn't do a quant set or if you did a quant set poorly or did a choppy job, reattempt the whole set. Even if you remember most of the data, you might do it 10 times faster than you would in the exam. But reattempt the whole set. But again, like I said before, reattempt it with a time constraint. Make sure you put a timer on. Make sure you reattempt it with a time constraint. For the most part, you don't have to analyze much in GK. You just know that either you don't know or you know the question. But for most mock tests, there are always explanations at the bottom that give you extra information on that topic. So make sure you take note of that. Analyze mock GK. For verbals, this is what we did: individual analysis, then group analysis. Present your arguments in favor or against that particular option is basically what we did.
Right, right. Thank you for those insights, Prem. That was really amazing to hear what your strategies were. And it is a new thing for me to learn. Like you divide your topics and then you divide your sources as well. So you'll take NRC and then you'll also choose that I'll refer to Indian Express. And Sanjana will take NRC and she'll say that I'll refer to Drishti IS for NRC. So this is a great model. And yeah, I really admire it. And will obviously tell my mentees to follow this model. Any last parting tips that you want to give the aspirants and any mistake that you committed but you would not want our mentees to do?
Any mistake that I committed, I would say I underestimated how psychological CLAT is, and that could have backfired easily. Uh, this is hard to say for someone who took CLAT very seriously because for 2 years I took it very seriously. For me, CLAT was my bread and butter. I said, if I don't get the college I want, I'm going to be very disappointed. So for 2 years, I took CLAT to my head, and I thought, okay, taking more than 140 marks means I'll definitely get in. But the thing is, even if you take that many marks, something can always go wrong on the last day. So on that day, it's really important to be in a good headspace. Something wrong could have happened to you in the previous days. So take care of your mental health. Make sure you're in a good headspace to attempt that mock. eat proper meals, have good sleep. It's fairly unlikely you will get good sleep the day before the exam, because almost everyone I know got poor sleep because they were anxious about the exam the next day. And that's completely okay, but that doesn't hamper your prospects of getting into the exam. And I can say generic stuff like have confidence in yourself, because honestly that is important and that works. Now, just saying have confidence in yourself doesn't give you confidence. So that's not really the most helpful thing to say to someone. But I would say dispel the notions that you're bad at this exam, or you can't do it, or I'm not so strong in English, so I'm never going to do well in CLAT, like that. That's nonsense. I've seen a million people who were not very familiar with English, who are not comfortable with English, but who sailed through CLAT done much better than I have as well. So basically, I would say it's important to have a good psychological state, is what I underestimated with CLAT.
Right, right. Thank you for this session, Prem, and taking out your precious time out of the hectic schedule at NLS. It was a pleasure having you here, and we hope to collaborate with you further for our further initiatives. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Uh, Thanks, guys. So that was just yeah. So that was Prem, who got a rank of 16 in CLAT and a rank of 2 in ALED 2022. As you could see, that he was also in a study buddy group, and all four of the study buddy group have made it to NLS. This is my sincere request as an NLS student and as your mentor, that find yourself such study buddies. And if you are not able to find such study buddies, you come back to us, the National Law Training Institute, and we'll allot you your study buddies based on your mock scores. It is really important given the wide coverage of GK that you're supposed to do. So you need to do GK from January to December, and we'll have like more than 500 to 600 topics to cover for GK. So you'll not be able to do it on your own alone, and it's like a proved fact. Even Rishabh, Kanish, Pranshu, and another guy in NLU Jodhpur, Sanjana, Prem, Anirudh, and another guy in NLS. They were all in study buddy groups, and they all managed to ace CLAT because they all managed to ace GK. And you can ace GK if you are thorough with every topic. And you can be thorough with every topic if you divide your topics and then collate your notes. And so yeah, this is a part of my initiative as well at the National Law Training Institute, where we mentor you as study buddies and we provide you with the framework. We keep you accountable. Accountability is a very important factor that plays out in CLAT. If you are not accountable, you will not be able to crack CLAT. This is my belief. If you are not accountable to your study buddies, that is to say, if you are not giving 2 mocks a week, if we ask you to give like 3 mocks a week, if we ask you to give Super 30 test, if you do not give, so that will disappoint us and it will dishearten you as well in the long run. So this is part of our initiative, that you make study buddy groups, that you have access to material for GK, you have access to NLS toppers who have gone through the entire process, who have gone through the entire ups and downs that CLAT entails. So yeah, I invite you all to join the National Law Training Institute as our mentees, and we'll be happy to help you throughout the CLAT preparation journey. I hope that this session helped you and gave you important insights as to how to ace the quantitative technique section. We shall be coming up with further more such mentorship programs related to specific sections. And yeah, so it was a pleasure having you here, and thank you for listening to us patiently. Thanks a lot. uh, Mohit is asking what we will get in your course. So Mohit, you can refer to the description box. This is for everybody who is watching our video for the first time. You can refer to our the description box, and you can join a Telegram channel. The entire details are present in the Telegram channel. Just to tell you what we get in our course, what we you will get in our courses. We provide you weekly GK MITs, most important topics list. Like it will have around 60 to 65 topics per week. What you can do is we'll allot you study buddies based on your mock scores. After you enroll in our course, we will provide you with study buddies, 3 more study buddies who are also scoring in your same range. So when we provide you GK MITs, what you are supposed to do is divide the topics. Like 15 topics you will take, 15 your other person will take, 15 other, and then collate your notes. This way, just working for 15 topics will make you entitled to have access to all the 60 topics notes. And this way, your burden will be like lightened, and you'll also be able to cover more thoroughly. So this is our program at the National Training Institute. We are also coming up with our test series, and it will be launched very pretty soon. And then you will have access to the test series created by NLS toppers, NLS mentors, and CLAT toppers. We provide you GK weekly MIT, as I already told you, and our mentors take a weekly doubt clearing session. So after you are done with your entire week, after you have given mocks, after you have like solved sectional tests, our mentors will take a live video session with you every weekend for your study buddy group specifically, and will ask you and will keep you accountable what you have done throughout the week, what will you do for the next week, prepare a roadmap. If you have any doubts related to preparation strategy, he or she shall clear your doubts. So this is our program. So Mohit is asking the fees. So the fees, if you choose to pay in monthly installments, the fees is 750 rupees per month. But if you decide to pay in one go, so it would be 2400 for entire 4 months till CLAT 2023. So if you pay in one go, it will there will be a discount of rupees 600. We have tried to keep this program as reasonable as possible, and we are just sustaining ourselves. This is a non-profitable initiative, and yeah, thank you, Raghav. We hope that we are able to help you in your CLAT preparation journey, and we hope that you are our star anchor for 2023. Okay, guys. So it was a pleasure having you here, and we hope to have you enrolled in our program. Thanks a lot.